Welcome to episode 27 of the Henry George Daily Devotional. We are in book 2, Population of Subsistence, chapter 2, Inference of Facts, from Facts. Alright, here we go. The general acceptance of the Malthusian theory and the high authority by which it is endorsed have seemed to me to make it expedient to review its grounds and the causes which have conspired to give it such a dominating influence in the discussion of social questions. But when we subject the theory itself to the test of straightforward analysis, it will, I think, be found as utterly untenable as the current theory of wages. Indeed, the current theory of wages and Malthusian doctrine kind of reinforce each other. So, since we fought so hard against the current theory of wages, let's now have George destroy the Malthusian theory. In the first place, George says, the facts which are marshaled in support of this theory do not prove it, and the analogies do not countenance it. And in the second place, there are facts which conclusively disprove it. Oh, quick little point I wanted to mention. Whether or not we, in the modern era, current era, talk about Malthusian theory, there's definitely a lot of people saying that, human population is going to peak in 100 years or something. And there are people who think it's very bad that we're starting to not have enough kids. And there are some people who think, I guess it's okay. I don't know. So this does seem still relevant. Alright, back to George. And in the second place, there are facts which conclusively disprove it. Malthusian theory. I go to the heart of the matter in saying that there is no warrant, either in experience or analogy, for the assumption that there is any tendency in population to increase faster than subsistence. The facts cited to show this simply show that where, owing to the sparseness of population, as in new countries, or where, owing to the unequal distribution of wealth, as among the poorer classes in old countries, human life is occupied with the physical necessities of existence, the tendency to reproduce is at a rate which would, were it to go on unchecked, sometime exceed subsistence. Jotson, that's John, the man we're all here to try to persuade, says that people are saying peak humans in 2086 at 10.4 billion. That's what all the predictors are predicting. Whether or not they openly say it's due to Malthusian doctrine or not, I don't know. Yes, so we continue with George. The idea is we would reproduce unchecked and we would at some point exceed subsistence. Alright. George says, but it is not a legitimate inference from this that the tendency to reproduce would show itself in the same force where population was sufficiently dense and wealth distributed with sufficient evenness to lift a whole community above the necessity of devoting their energies to a struggle for mere existence. Nor can it be assumed that the tendency to reproduce, by causing poverty, must prevent the existence of such a community. For this manifestly would be assuming the very point at issue and reasoning in a circle. And even if it be admitted that the tendency to multiply must ultimately produce poverty, it cannot from this alone be predicated of existing poverty that it is due to this cause until it be shown that there are no other causes which can account for it. A thing in the present state of government, laws, and customs manifestly impossible. Yeah. It is funny when we consider the historical context of this, let's see. Population of Earth in 1879. World population by year. 1879. Doesn't even go back that far. We don't know. Alright, well in 1900 we had 1.6 billion. And that would be 21 years after Progress and Poverty was published. So they're all worried at 1.76 billion, probably around 1.5 billion or something, when it was published, that they were overpopulating the earth. And now we are at 8 billions. All right. This is where George continues. This is abundantly shown in the quote essay on population itself. This famous book, which is much oftener spoken of than read, is still well worth perusal, if only as a literary curiosity. Perusal meaning like to study intently, which people often misuse. Yes, to peruse is to read or examine something, not to browse. Anyway, the contrast between the merits of the book itself and the effect it has produced, or is at least credited with, for those Sir James Stewart, Mr. Townsend, and others share with Malthus the glory of discovering the principle of population, it was the publication of the Essay on Population that brought it prominently forward, is, it seems to me, one of the most remarkable things in the history of literature, and it is easy to understand how Godwin, whose political justice provoked the Essay on Population, should until his old age have disdained a reply. It begins with the assumption that population tends to increase in a geometrical ratio, while subsistence can at best be made to increase only in an arithmetical ratio, an assumption just as valid and no more so than it would be from the fact that a puppy doubled the length of his tail while he added so many pounds to his weight. To assert a geometric progression of tail and an arithmetical progression of weight. And the inference from the assumption is just as Swift in satire might have credited to the savants of a previously dogless island, who, by bringing these two ratios together, might deduce the very striking consequence that by the time the dog grew to a weight of 50 pounds, his tail would be over a mile long and be extremely difficult to wag, and hence recommend the prudential check of a bandage as the only alternative to the positive check of constant amputations. I don't remember this analogy. Constantly cutting off the dog's tail because we're worried the tail will be unmanageable by the dog's slow-growing body. That's pretty gruesome there, George. Commencing with such an absurdity, the essay includes a long argument for the imposition of a duty on the importation and the payment of a bounty. Table Cat says, this sounds like a late April Fool's joke. Yes, today is the day after April Fool's. George was off by a day. He didn't know I would read it on the wrong day. And the payment of a bounty for the exportation of corn. The essay includes a long argument for the imposition of a duty on the importation and the payment of a bounty for the exportation of corn, an idea that has long since been sent to the limbo of exploded fallacies. And it is marked throughout the argumentative portions by passages which show on the part of the reverend gentleman the most ridiculous incapacity for logical thought. As, for instance, that if wages were to be increased from 18 pence, or 2 shillings per day, to 5 shillings, meat would necessarily increase in price from 8 or 9 pence to 2 or 3 shillings per pound, and the condition of the laboring classes would therefore not be improved. A statement to which I can think of no parallel so close as a proposition I once heard a certain printer gravely advance, that because an author whom he had known was 40 years old when he was 20, the author must now be 80 years old because he, the printer, was 40. This confusion of thought does not merely crop out here and there, it characterizes the whole work. Footnote. Malthus' other works, though written after he became famous, made no mark, and are treated with contempt, even by those who find in the essay a great discovery. The Encyclopedia Brittanica, for instance, though fully accepting the Malthusian theory, says of Malthus' political economy, quote, "It is very ill arranged, and is in no respect either a practical or a scientific exposition of the subject. It is in great part occupied with an examination of parts of Mr. Ricardo's peculiar doctrines, and with an inquiry into the nature and causes of value. Nothing, however, can be more unsatisfactory than these discussions. In truth, Mr. Malthus never had any clear or accurate perception of Mr. Ricardo's theories, or of the principles which determine the value in exchange of different articles." End quote. Dang, I did not know the Encyclopedia Britannica offered such opinionated opinions. Ooh. Anyway, poor Malthus. It seems like I don't know. We'll continue with George. The main body of the book is taken up with what is in reality a refutation of the theory which the book advances. For Malthus' review of what he calls the positive checks to population is simply the showing that the results which he attributes to overpopulation actually arise from other causes. Of all the cases cited, and pretty much the whole globe is passed over in the survey, in which vice and misery check increase by limiting marriages or shortening the term of human life, there is not a single case in which the vice and misery can be traced to an actual increase in the number of mouths over the power of the accompanying hands to feed them, but in every case the vice and misery are shown to spring from unsocial ignorance and rapacity, or from bad government, unjust laws, or destructive warfare. We'll stop there. George says it's not because we had too many babies, but because we had too many bad laws. Like, subscribe, and share this with all of your babies.